So across all these topics and areas of research with these three researchers that we heard from today, there's a couple themes. One is that kind of the mantra out there among all of these folks was making sure that their research is relevant to the communities and that it's ethical. And I really think that they've given us some new ideas about that and making sure that we connect with our communities that we're hoping to do research or currently conducting research. So we have about 30 minutes for questions. So I believe the microphone's still there, so please give us some questions. Thank you.
I'm Colin Hopkins. I'm with the National Institute of Alcohol Abuse and Alcoholism, and I'm actually really new American. A question for Abigail is that you were saying that people are more likely to donate if it's blood or saliva. One of the things that is coming up now is a question of regenerative medicine and production of stem cells, and a source of that is blood. And I'm wondering how you think this might impact future responses.
So once again, it goes back to the education of the community and then having knowledge of what the blood, they're more likely to allow you to take blood samples and to participate if you're working with the tribe, then the tribal council or whoever they have regulating research is aware of what you're doing and what the purpose is. It's when there's a lack of understanding and education about what is the actual purpose and what is the actual direct benefit. So, like I said, I get to work with tribes all the time. My husband's always saying they see me more than he does. But it's important to be in the communities at all times because sometimes when we talk about direct benefit, to some tribes that means they want to see a direct benefit as your project is going along. That may be you hire community members and you train and bring up capacity in the communities to do the research themselves. For others, when we talk about benefit, they may say, you know what, I see the benefit to contributing to this body of knowledge for American Indians and Alaska Natives. But in order to do that, for them to make those decisions, they have to be informed. And that is, once again, the biggest problem I see is people are bringing interventions and bringing studies and have these great ideas for research that they show up in front of a tribal council for 5 to 10 minutes to present, and that is not enough time for them to make a truly informed decision, so they don't. And so it's really important to invest and spend that time. Actually, my program has, I think, 2 grants funded by the institute we work under, looking at, we're doing some of the, there's very few randomized controlled trials on substance abuse within American Indian, Alaska Native communities, and we're going to be working with 4 tribal communities doing that type of research. The man that I work with who's the PI on that, we spent 6 months traveling to all of these communities that we're working, we spent days, we spent hours on the phone through WebEx, really making sure that they understood the actual intervention that we were doing. We invested a lot of time, much of it thanks to a grant. I also spent some time with a center, the University of Washington, I'm a tribal liaison, the Center for Translational Health Sciences, which is under the NIH's Center for Translational Science Awards. And they had actually given us a grant that was to go out and just spend time in the community to get the information to put in a large-scale R1 grant. So that kind of funding is necessary, and I really think that the federal government really needs to invest more in that relationship building, because if we're truly going to impact health disparities, we have to build relationships.
Just a comment. One of the issues in the genetics field is numbers. And one thing we find is that we generate a huge amount of data, but we are not able to share it with anybody else. We can't deposit it in the databases because it's relatively easy to identify individuals from the studies. I think that something should be looked at is possibly a move towards the Icelandic model of ECO, something which is controlled by appreciate the opportunity to come here and actually learn, get a greater understanding of who we are working for and how we can better serve you rather than us taking. We are not trying to take, we are actually trying to help. We just need, we are naive. I have lived in a lab all my life.
I'll fill that one. First of all, I forgot to my Uncle Harold a shout out. So that's generous and all, but I think that an area like Iceland, a lot of the human genetic variation that's there is fixated, so it doesn't really benefit us much. What we need to do is generate our own data and have genomic sovereignty over that.
What I was trying to say was you use the Icelandic model whereby...
Oh, the model itself.
The
Sure.
model, not use their data. No.
Yeah, sure. No, I like the model. I like the idea there's complete transparency there. And back to the idea of danger and fear, like, we shouldn't fear that putting our genome into the public domain. I'm with George Church on that one. I think that it's possibly a good thing. I do, however, believe that if we want to mask certain parts of our genome with the algorithm or only release certain things, I don't think that, frankly, the NIH, if they fund a project, we shouldn't have to release the data to them. And the same thing, because I know the NSF is a similar model. Maybe my perspective will change in the future, but at this point.
So I'm going to give a shout out to Uncle Harold too. Just in speaking to you, you're talking about, you've been in a lab, your whole career. And one of the things that we talked about earlier in another presentation, and that's one of the things organizations such as mine, and there are multiple organizations, University of Washington, we have the Indigenous Wellness Research Institute, University of New Mexico, we have the Center for Participatory Research. I could keep naming names of people who have worked with tribal communities in true collaboration, and you can tell from the number of tribal partners and from the publications that they have. And when you show up to a conference, they have a community member with them presenting. Those exist, and there are people out there with the knowledge. What our organization does is that I work with so many investigators and principal investigators who have never stepped foot in a tribal community, who probably have never met an Indian in their life until they met me. And I deal with a lot of ignorance of just not knowing. And so they I always make them spend a lot of time with me. We travel to tribal communities, and I assist them in building that relationship. But sometimes I also say, you know what, this isn't the right area for you, because we also have to have that. And I know all of us Native people working in research have that role as a gatekeeper. And that doesn't mean that you're just some culturally incompetent person. It just means, sometimes there's a right fit for the right people, and it may not be the right fit for you. But I have worked with so many people who truly have a heart to serve humanity generally, and who understand and know that the health disparities exist in our communities, and they want to be a part of those solutions. And so reaching out to organizations who have been doing it for a long time, funding those kind of organizations is really, really important.
I've had the opportunity to work with a group in South Dakota, and I watched as they build a research relationship with a lot of tribal communities in the Northern Plains. And I've known the PI for about 7 years now, and they've just now started hearing from the community saying, we want to know more about genetic research. So that really does take a long time to build those relationships, and especially when you're talking about studies that are collecting samples. This particular study, I'm thinking about it, is a multi-site study with partners in various parts of the country that are doing an analysis on the samples. And it wasn't until some of the lab people traveled out to the community sites that they really could appreciate the hard work that was going on the ground in collecting those samples, keeping them on ice, and getting them flown out to the place, driven across the state for 6 hours, and flown out, to the lab so that they could get there and be analyzed and get a good solid sample to look at. So I think it's extremely important to build those relationships and have that face-to-face contact, which we've heard multiple times throughout the day-to-day.
But just one more thought on that, and it's that, we obviously have to approach each indigenous culture independently and understand what they want. We talked about that a lot today. But at this point, now where we're starting to be completely autonomous, and we can hire people within our own community to do everything that we need to do. And that's probably what we need to do moving forward. So, but not to discourage collaboration, it's really important.
Hi everyone, Sarah Ptowski here. So I have a quick request actually from the virtual audience. They just wanted to make sure that if possible, if you are published in any of your research pieces, the biobanking survey, so on, that maybe we can share them at some point after this event. So.
Hi, I'm Kathy Epps from the National Institute on Drug Abuse, and thank you so much for these presentations and for the day. It's been a really exciting event. There are two things I wanted to comment on. The first one is something just to put out there, and that is that, and I don't even really know whether it's a question or comment, but basically, sometimes in scientific review or in other venues, we will hear people say comments like, well, this project really shouldn't go forward, or we shouldn't rate it highly because it includes genetics research, and no American Indian community would want genetics research. And so it makes me think about sort of these gatekeeping functions and how they can really serve to keep the science back, and you know how these sort of blanket statements are really, really, really dangerous. So I think it's really exciting you guys are taking this on, and I think this conversation is really important to make it clear that that's not, you know, that might be some people's belief, but that's not everybody's belief. The other thing I was going to say relates to data sharing, and just to correct some misperceptions. The NIH policy on data sharing requires submission of a data sharing plan in some circumstances, but that plan does not need to say you're going to share data. Rather, it needs to say why either that you will share data and how you will, or why you cannot share data. And that's fully acceptable, as, you know, as long as you can justify what's going on. And so that's just to correct a misperception. Thank you.
Thanks for the clarification.
To Kathy's first comment, I wanted to add to that and say that I think it's been really informative for me to sit here today and listen to presentations about some of the work that's happening with Jeff's presentation on the work of tobacco and genetic studies. And something I keep hearing throughout my recent research career is that we need to write more about these things, and it's sometimes scary for me as a young Native investigator to think about writing and publishing and having my thoughts and things out there for everyone to critique. But I had the opportunity to work with some Maori evaluators through the American Evaluation Association. One of the Maori leaders was saying, you know, no one's going to write these things up for us. We have to be active and participating and putting these ideas out there. And I think what Kathy's talking about with, you know, making sure that these processes are documented, I think one way that NIH can sort of support that is to make sure that with these grants or with Native communities that this process is also considered an important publication rather than just publishing our results from these studies that are funded by NIH.
Thank you for your comment about those blanket statements, because that is one of the hard things that we deal with all the time. And so it could be my organization or other people's organizations who are submitting those, and we get them back and think, why did they fund this totally awesome project? And one of the things I always suggest, and I actually review quite a few grants also, is that within the letters of support, specifically from tribal organizations and tribes, look and see if they actually say in there, we are interested in genetics research, or there's a tribal resolution that shows that the tribe has considered and passed a resolution that says, yes, we will consider and we are going to participate in genetics research. So there are opportunities to look and to educate other review members on what to look for so that you can ensure that the community is in true partnership. You can always tell, I always love grants that come through that I can tell they're all the 3 exact same letters where they just change the names out and have people sign them. That's always a bad idea. Because that's when you can tell that the community truly hasn't been as participatory as we would want to see, particularly around something like a genetic study. And I also know in our next panel, Ron Whitener is going to be presenting, and he has done a lot of work on data sharing agreements having to do with data that is taken from tribes, reservation-based tribes, and how you what is the best way to kind of do that? So maybe he'll speak a little bit to that, or I'm just putting him on the hot seat to do it anyways.
Any other questions?
Hi, I'm Mark Skotsky, I'm from Office of Research and Development and Veterans Administration. I wanted to ask Mr. Fox one question. I think it's an incredible project which you're working on, trying to type through the exome capture, trying to figure out what the blood types are in individuals. I'm a pathologist by trade, and I have to admit that when you look at blood banking, you will find individuals stated as this is from this country, this is the population of A, B, AD, and O, and all that. But I think it's an incredible disservice to the Native Americans when you actually start looking at that population as a whole. And it's understandable that there's a predominance of type O, some A, and B almost doesn't exist. And the biggest marker that anybody has ever found is something with Diego. Great. I think there's a greater need to do some more granular work. And I don't want to say anything, but I would be asking if you'd be interested in sometime doing this for the greater good. Looking at that area, because there's so much information that can be helpful to so many different people, especially when medicine moves forward with transplantations and all the other diseases that have to be countered with a blood transfusion. I was wondering what you think about that.
Absolutely, I 100% agree with you. That's an interesting comment. I think in Brazil, in the Amazon, O preaches fixation. So 100% of the people are O blood type. So, that has a huge bearing and significance in the way they transfuse blood. Additionally, the kind of impetus for this whole project is that we're doing a lot of the blood typing on African Americans. And they receive the lion's share of blood transfusions in this country for chronic transfusions. So this whole project is looking at human genetic variation in these genes so we can reduce that allogenic burden. So when individuals receive a blood transfusion per month, we're trying to reduce that load of antibodies they generate. So when they do, when the number does come up, and they can get a medullary cavity transplant, now we're talking about no antibody load and a clean transplant. And that's what we're trying. And same thing with thalassemia and many other things. But that's the idea, is just kind of utilizing that to increase cross-matching, especially in the populations that need it the most. So yeah, that's what my current, when I finish that paper, hopefully I get to graduate.
We definitely want you to graduate.